A biker tore a woman's shirt and unleashed a chain of events that would reunite two brothers in arms. A single tattoo silenced a bar, but a patch on a cut revealed a secret thought lost to war. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. I said, "You're gonna have a drink with me, sweetheart, and I don't like being told no." The bar, a dive called The Last Call, was already loud, but the man's voice cut through the din with a drunken, aggressive edge. He was big, his face flushed with alcohol and belligerence, and he had Lucy cornered against the worn mahogany bar. His hand clamped around her upper arm. "Let go of me," Lucy said, her voice tight with a fear she was trying hard to mask. She tried to pull away, but his grip was like a vice. From a shadowed booth in the corner, a man watched. He was a study in stillness, a grizzled statue amidst the chaos. They called him Ghost. His hair was cropped short, peppered with gray, and his face was a roadmap of hard living and harder memories, etched with lines that spoke of too much sun and not enough peace. He wore a leather vest over a plain black t-shirt, the colors of his MC, the Iron Dogs, prominent on the back. He'd been nursing a single beer for an hour, his presence so quiet he'd become part of the scenery. The drunk, a loudmouth named Randy, sneered. "What, you too good for me?" He gave her a sharp tug, and the sound of tearing fabric was like a gunshot in the sudden, horrified silence that gripped their corner of the bar. Lucy's floral blouse ripped at the shoulder, exposing the strap of her tank top and a sliver of pale skin beneath. That was it. The line had been crossed. Ghost moved. He didn't roar, he didn't shout. He simply stood, the motion fluid and unnervingly silent, just like his name. His bar stool scraped softly against the floor. In 3 long, purposeful strides, he was there, inserting his body between Randy and a now trembling Lucy. "Walk away," Ghost said. His voice was low, a gravelly rumble that held no anger, only a flat, absolute finality. Randy, emboldened by liquid courage and pride, puffed out his chest. "Or what, old man, you and what army?" Ghost's eyes, the color of a winter sky, didn't waver. He didn't bother answering. Instead, he reached for the drunk's wrist, his movements economical and precise. As his arm extended, the sleeve of his t-shirt rode up, revealing the lower half of a sprawling, intricate tattoo on his forearm. It was the eagle, globe, and anchor, the symbol of the United States Marine Corps. The bar, which had been holding its breath, seemed to exhale a collective, awed silence. The symbol alone commanded a visceral respect, but it was the way it was displayed, not as a souvenir, but as a part of the man's very flesh, a permanent testament to an identity forged in fire. That was utterly silencing. This wasn't just a veteran, this was something else entirely. Randy's bravado faltered, his drunken brain struggling to process the sudden shift in the atmosphere. He was just a bully. This was a warrior. But the real end to the confrontation came from the other side of the bar. Another man stood up. He was broader than Ghost, with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen their own share of darkness. He wore the coveted, feared colors of the Hells Angels. The Death's Head patch seemed to glare at the scene. This was Mark, the president of the local charter. All eyes swung to him. A Hells Angel president getting involved could only mean one thing: an escalation into something truly bloody. Mark didn't look at Randy. He didn't even look at Lucy. His gaze was locked on Ghost, specifically on the patch on his vest. He took a single step forward and the crowd parted for him as if by magic. He didn't speak. He simply raised a thick, calloused finger and pointed. He wasn't pointing at the Marine tattoo. He was pointing at the rocker patch stitched neatly below Ghost's club emblem. A single word was etched there in stark white letters: Marine. The finality in that silent gesture was more powerful than any threat. It was a recognition, a code, an understanding that transcended club loyalties and barroom brawls. It was the law of an older, more brutal brotherhood, Randy, now completely deflated and terrified of the attention from two different MCs, mumbled an apology and practically fell over himself scrambling out of the bar. The tension shattered. The bar's noise slowly returned to a nervous hum. Lucy, clutching her torn shirt, breathed a shaky, "Thank you." Her eyes, wide and the color of warm honey, met Ghost's. In their depths, he saw not just gratitude, but a spark of something else, a fierce, captivating light that hadn't been extinguished by the fear. "I'm Lucy." Ghost gave a single curt nod. "Ghost." His voice was still that low rumble, but it had lost some of its ice. But Mark wasn't done. He walked over, his heavy boots thudding on the wooden floor. He stopped a few feet from Ghost, his expression unreadable. Lucy looked at him, a fresh wave of confusion and fear washing over her. "Mark, what is it?" Mark ignored her, his eyes drilling into Ghost. "That tattoo. Fallujah, 2004, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines." It wasn't a question. Ghost went perfectly still, his body tensing as if ready for a different kind of fight. The carefully constructed walls behind his eyes shuddered. "Who are you?" Mark's voice was rough, choked with an emotion that seemed to surprise even him. Ghost's own voice was barely a whisper. "They called me Sergeant Collins, but my men, they called me Ghost." The color drained from Mark's face. He took a stumbling step backward, his hand going to the cut-off denim vest he wore over his colors as if reaching for a memory. His eyes glistened under the bar's dim lights. "No," Mark breathed, the word full of agony and disbelief. "That's not possible. I was there. I saw the RPG hit your Humvee. I held your dog tags in my hand. They told us you were gone. They told us you were KIA." Lucy looked between the two men, her mind reeling. "Mark, what are you talking about? You knew him?" Mark finally turned to his sister, his face a mask of raw, 15-year-old grief. "Knew him? Lucy, this is John Ghost Collins, my sergeant, the man I watched die in a fire-filled ambush in Fallujah, the man I owed my life to a dozen times over." He looked back at Ghost, his voice breaking. "You were my brother, and we buried an empty casket for you." The bar, the noise, the world, it all faded away. There was only the three of them, standing in a triangle of shattered pasts and impossible truths. Ghost closed his eyes, the weight of those words, of that long-buried guilt and grief pressing down on him like a physical force. "I didn't die, Mark," he said, the words ripped from a place deep within his soul. "But a part of me did, and I'm so damn sorry I never came home." The silence in the wake of his confession was heavier than any barroom brawl. Ghost stood there, a man exposed, the foundations of his carefully constructed new life cracking apart. Mark just stared, his expression a turbulent sea of confusion, anger, and a heartbreaking, dawning hope. Lucy, the unexpected anchor in this storm, found her voice first. We can't do this here." She gestured at the bar, where every patron was now doing a terrible job of pretending not to be watching the drama unfold. "My apartment is above the florist's shop, 2 doors down, please." Mark gave a stiff, jerky nod, his eyes never leaving Ghost. "Yeah, okay." The short walk was a surreal procession. Ghost moved like an automaton, the Marine in him falling into step behind Mark, the Hell's Angel president, a man who was once the young, scared Lance Corporal he'd promised to bring home. Lucy led the way, her keys jangling in a hand that still trembled. Her apartment was a surprise, a warm, inviting space filled with the rich scent of flowers from the shop below, and the softer fragrance of vanilla from a candle on the coffee table. It was all soft lighting, overflowing bookshelves, and vibrant art, a stark contrast to the harsh, masculine worlds the two men inhabited. It felt like a sanctuary, which made the tension they brought with them feel even more profane. The door clicked shut and the fragile silence shattered. Mark turned on Ghost, his fists clenched at his sides. 15 years, he bit out, the words laced with a pain that was still fresh. 15 years, John. My parents grieved for you. I grieve for you. We have a flag in a case with your name on it. What the hell happened? Ghost John flinched as if struck. He walked to the window, looking down at the quiet street, his broad back to them. The marine rocker on his cut seemed to mock him. The ambush was a clusterfuck, he began, his voice distant, haunted. You remember. The IED, then the RPG. Our Humvee was toast, shrapnel, everywhere. He unconsciously rubbed his thigh, where a mass of scar tissue lay hidden beneath his jeans. I was thrown clear, but I was hit. Bad. I don't remember much, just the heat, the noise, and then silence. He turned to face them, his wintry eyes clouded with the memory. I woke up in a makeshift clinic run by a Shiite family. They'd found me in the rubble, assumed I was dead, but saw I was breathing. They risked everything to hide me, to patch me up. It took months. By the time I was mobile, the unit had rotated home. The battle zone had shifted. I was listed as KIA-BNR, body not recovered. Mark shook his head, a muscle ticking in his jaw. But after? Why didn't you come home? A phone call, a letter, anything? This, John said, tapping his temple, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. This didn't come home. The man who stepped off the plane wasn't the man who left. The sounds, the smells. I'd jump at a car backfiring. I'd wake up screaming, thinking I was back in that burning vehicle. I saw the way other guys came back, the hollow looks in their eyes. I couldn't do that to my family, to your family. You all had a hero to remember. I thought it was better to let the hero stay dead than to come back a broken ghost. The raw confession hung in the scented air. Lucy had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Mark's anger seemed to deflate, replaced by a profound, weary understanding. He knew that particular demon. He'd fought his own battles with it in the dark of night, the roar of a motorcycle, the only thing that could sometimes drown out the echoes of war. Damn it, Sarge, Mark whispered, the old title slipping out, laden with a decade and a half of grief. He sank onto Lucy's sofa, the leather creaking under his weight. We would have helped you. I would have helped you. I know, John said, his own voice thick. That's why I couldn't. You were just a kid. You'd already seen too much. I couldn't be your burden. A strange choked sound that was half laugh, half sob escaped Mark. A burden? You saved my life, John. That day and a dozen others. I owed you everything and you just disappeared. It was Lucy who bridged the gap. She moved to her brother's side, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder, but her eyes were on John. You thought you were protecting them, she said softly, by carrying that pain alone. John just nodded, unable to speak. The charged chemistry from the bar was still there, humming between John and Lucy, but now it was layered with this new, profound intimacy of shared trauma and understanding. He looked at her, really looked at her, at the fierce intelligence in her honey-colored eyes, at the strength in her posture as she comforted her brother. She wasn't just a woman he'd saved. She was a beacon in his perpetual night. Mark saw the look. He sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of years. He stood up, clapping a heavy hand on John's shoulder. The contact was electric, a connection reforged. You're a stubborn, stupid bastard, you know that? Mark said, but there was no heat left in it, only a gruff affection. But you're here now, and you're alive. He looked from John to his sister, a slow, knowing smile touching his lips for the first time. I gotta go, club business. Lucy, you'll look after him? It wasn't really a question. After Mark left, the apartment was once again silent, but the tension had shifted, transformed into something quieter, more potent. Can I get you a drink? Lucy asked, her voice a little unsteady. Something stronger than beer? Whiskey, if you have it, John said. She poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass and brought it to him. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and the same jolt from the bar, now amplified by their shared vulnerability, passed between them. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. "Thank you," he said, his voice low. "For this. For not being afraid of me." "How could I be?" she whispered, her gaze dropping to the marine tattoo on his forearm. "After what you've carried for all of us." He set the untouched whiskey down on a bookshelf. The air between them crackled. He reached out, his calloused fingers hovering near the torn fabric of her blouse. "I'm sorry about your shirt." A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "It's just a shirt." His hand moved from the fabric to her face, his thumb stroking her undamaged cheek with a reverence that made her breath catch. He was so close she could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes, feel the heat radiating from his body. "You have no idea how beautiful you are," he murmured, the words raw and honest, stripped of all pretense. "The way you stood up to him, the fire in your eyes. It's the first real thing I've seen in years." Lucy leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a second. "Then see me, John," she breathed. "Stop being a ghost." That was his undoing. He closed the small distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was nothing like the violence and chaos of his past. It was slow, deep, and achingly tender. It was a homecoming. It was a confession. It was a promise. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against the solid, unyielding strength of his body, and she melted into him, her hands sliding up to tangle in the short hair at the nape of his neck. The kiss tasted of whiskey, of tears, and of a second chance neither of them ever dreamed they'd get. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, they simply held each other in the warm, silent apartment, the ghosts of the past finally beginning to recede, replaced by the fragile, blazing hope of a future. The world outside Lucy's apartment ceased to exist. For a long while, they simply stood there, wrapped in each other's arms. 2 survivors clinging to a life raft in a sea of past regrets and future uncertainties. The kiss had been a catalyst, shattering the final walls John had so painstakingly built around his soul. He could feel the frantic beat of Lucy's heart against his own, a syncopated rhythm of fear, hope, and a wild, undeniable attraction. He finally pulled back, just far enough to look into her eyes. The honey-colored depths were shimmering with unshed tears, but the fire he'd seen in the bar was now a steady, warm flame, and it was directed entirely at him. He began, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know how to do this. Any of this." Lucy's hand came up to cradle his jaw, her thumb stroking the rough stubble. "We don't have to figure it all out tonight, John. We just have to start." She led him to the sofa, and he sank into the soft cushions, the exhaustion of the evening, of the last 15 years, suddenly crashing down on him. He watched as she moved around her small kitchen, pouring him a glass of water this time. Every movement was graceful, grounded. She was so alive, so present. It was a stark contrast to the spectral existence he'd been leading. "Tell me about Mark," John said, the name feeling both foreign and familiar on his tongue. "The man he became." Lucy smiled, a soft, proud expression transforming her face. She sat beside him, tucking her feet underneath her. "He's a force of nature. After he came home, he was lost. Angry, you know. My parents didn't know what to do with him. Then he found the club. Or it found him. It gave him structure, a new brotherhood. He worked his way up from a prospect to president through sheer will and loyalty. He's fiercely protective, sometimes to a fault. He runs the charter with the same sense of honor and duty you probably taught him." John absorbed this, a complex mix of pride and sorrow twisting in his gut. He taught a young man to survive a war, and those lessons had been applied to building a criminal empire. It was a bitter pill. "And you?" he asked, his gaze sweeping the room, taking in the books on psychology and art history, the thriving plants, the easel in the corner with a half-finished painting of a stormy sea. "How does a kindergarten teacher end up with a Hell's Angel for a brother and me?" "In her living room?" Lucy laughed, a light musical sound that seemed to cleanse the heavy air. "Life is weird. I've always been the calm one, the normal one. I think I grounded Mark when he needed it. This apartment has always been his safe harbor too. He checks in on me almost every day, usually with some overly muscular prospect in tow to make sure the pipes are okay or some other flimsy excuse." Her expression softened. "He never really got over you, John. He talked about Sergeant Ghost Collins like you were a legend, a hero. It shaped the man he wanted to be." The guilt, a constant gnawing companion, intensified. "I'm no hero, Lucy. A hero doesn't let his family bury an empty casket. A hero doesn't hide. A hero is a human being who is scared and in pain," she countered, her voice firm. "And from what I just heard, you thought you were sparing them a lifetime of that pain. It came from a place of love, however misguided." Her understanding was a balm he didn't deserve. He reached out, lacing his fingers with hers. The simple contact was more intimate than the kiss. It was a connection. "What happens now?" he asked, the question hanging between them. "Now," Lucy said, squeezing his hand. "You rest. You're safe here." She led him to her bedroom. It was as warm and inviting as the rest of the apartment, with a large, comfortable-looking bed draped in a soft, quilted blanket. The intimacy of the moment was profound but not sexual. It was about shelter. "I'll take the couch," she said. "No," he said, the word coming out more forcefully than he intended. He gentled his voice. "I've slept on worse than a couch, the floor even. This is your home. I'm not putting you out of your bed." She searched his face, then nodded. "Okay. But if you need anything, I'm just right out there." She turned to leave, but he caught her wrist, his touch gentle. "Lucy, thank you." She just smiled and closed the door softly behind her. Alone, John stood in the middle of the room, the silence pressing in on him. He shrugged out of his cut, laying it carefully over a chair. The marine rocker seemed to watch him. He stripped down to his boxers and slid between the cool, clean sheets. They smelled like her, like flowers and vanilla. It was the most peaceful scent he'd encountered in 2 decades. For the first time in 15 years, John Ghost Collins closed his eyes and slept a dreamless, deep and healing sleep. The next morning, the smell of coffee and bacon woke him. For a disorienting second, he didn't know where he was. The room was sunny, peaceful. The sounds of war were replaced by the gentle hum of a small town waking up. He pulled on his jeans and followed the scent. Lucy was at the stove, humming softly. She was wearing a simple robe, her hair piled in a messy bun. She looked like everything he'd ever secretly longed for and had never allowed himself to have. "Morning," she said, turning with a bright smile that made his chest ache. "I hope you're hungry. I wasn't sure, so I made enough for a small platoon." The casual military reference, delivered without pity or weight, made him smile. A real, genuine smile that felt strange on his face. "Sounds perfect." As they ate, a comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated by the easy rhythm of a shared meal. It was then that a familiar thunderous rumble echoed from the street below. Multiple engines. Lucy went to the window and peered out. "It's Mark," she said, "and he brought the whole crew." A flicker of the old anxiety, the instinct to run, sparked in John's gut, but he squashed it. This was his reality now. A few minutes later, heavy boots sounded on the stairs and Mark entered the apartment without knocking, followed by David, his sergeant-at-arms, and Paul, the treasurer. The small space was suddenly filled with an overwhelming amount of leather-clad, intimidating masculinity. Mark's eyes went straight to John, who was standing by the table, coffee mug in hand. The look was assessing, but the hostility from the night before was gone, replaced by a determined, almost businesslike resolve. "We need to talk," Mark said, his voice the low rumble of the president, not the grieving lance corporal. "Club business." Lucy started to gather the plates. "I'll give you some space." "No," both John and Mark said in unison. They looked at each other, a flicker of their old mochi passing between them. "You're part of this now, Lucy," Mark said, "whether any of us like it or not." Once they were all seated, the Hells Angels on the sofa, John in an armchair, and Lucy perched on the armrest beside him, Mark got straight to the point. "The Iron Dogs," Mark began, looking at John. "Your club. They're small, but they're solid. They have a reputation for being straight shooters, no pun intended. But there's a problem. A new group, the Vipers, are moving in. They're ambitious, they're violent, and they don't respect the old agreements. They've been pushing into our territory, and they're eyeballing the Dogs' turf too." David, a mountain of a man with a face that looked like it had been used to break bricks, grunted in agreement. "They're testing the waters, seeing who's weak." "The Dogs aren't weak," John said, his voice taking on the defensive tone of a loyal member. "I know they aren't," Mark agreed, "but they're outnumbered. And without an alliance, the Vipers will pick them apart. Then they'll be stronger when they come for us." John saw where this was going. "You're proposing an alliance between the Hells Angels and the Iron Dogs?" "I'm proposing a merger," Mark corrected, his gaze intense. "Your prez, a guy named Vince, he's getting old. He's talking about retiring to Arizona. The club is nervous. This Viper threat has them spooked. They need strong leadership. They need a legend." John stared at him, comprehension dawning. "No, Mark, no. That's not me. Not anymore." "It is you," Mark insisted, leaning forward. "John, you were born to lead. It's in your blood. You led us through hell and back. You can lead a motorcycle club through a turf war. This is how you come home. This is how you make it right. You protect your brothers, your new brothers. And in doing so, you protect my sister." The logic was brutal and inescapable. It was a path laid out before him, a way to atone, to belong, to use the skills he'd honed in one theater of war in another. He looked at Lucy. Her face was pale, but her eyes held a grim understanding. She knew this world. She knew the dangers. But she also saw the twisted redemption in the offer. "What about the Marines?" John asked quietly, touching the tattoo on his arm. "That never goes away," Mark said, his own hand unconsciously going to a USMC tattoo on his bicep, mostly hidden under his cut. "This is just a different uniform. The mission is the same. Protect your tribe." Later that day, John rode his motorcycle to the Iron Dogs clubhouse, a modest garage on the industrial side of town. The air was thick with tension. The men, his brothers, greeted him with a mixture of relief and anxiety. Their president, Vince, a man in his 60s with a kind but weary face, confirmed everything Mark had said. "The Vipers, Ghost. They're a cancer. They hit one of our prospects last night. Just a warning. We're not big enough to fight them alone." John looked around the room at the faces of the men he'd ridden with for the past 5 years. They were mechanics, welders, construction workers. They were not soldiers, but they were his. "We won't be alone," John said, his voice taking on the calm, authoritative tone of Sergeant Collins. He laid out Mark's proposal. The vote was unanimous. The Iron Dogs would prospect for the Hells Angels. They would become a feeder charter under the protection and authority of the larger club. And John "Ghost" Collins would be their new president, the direct liaison to Mark. The following weeks were a whirlwind of brutal, exhausting work. John's life became a balancing act between the two worlds. His days were spent at the garage, integrating the dogs into the Angels' operations, which were far more complex and far-reaching than he'd imagined. Legitimate businesses like a custom bike shop and a bar were fronts for a sophisticated network of influence. He didn't ask for details, and Mark, respecting the unspoken lines when didn't offer them. His nights were spent with Lucy. Their relationship grew in the quiet spaces between the chaos. It was built on a foundation of deep, unspoken understanding. She never pressed him for details about his work, and he never brought the violence of his new life into her sanctuary. Their chemistry was a constant humming presence. A charged look across the room, a casual brush of hands while washing dishes, the way her body fit against his when they slept. It was all a slow, delicious burn, a promise of a future they were both fighting for. There were lighthearted moments too. The first time the massive, terrifying David came over for dinner and spent 20 minutes patiently showing Lucy how to properly season a cast-iron skillet. The time a group of prospects trying to impress their new president showed up to fix Lucy's leaky faucet and nearly flooded the entire apartment, resulting in a comical scene of burly bikers frantically mopping the floor with tiny floral tea towels. One evening, John came home to find Lucy and Mark in a heated debate over a game of Scrabble. "Chi is not a word," Mark insisted, scowling at the board. "It is too, it's a Chinese life force. Look it up," Lucy retorted, grinning triumphantly. John leaned against the doorframe, watching them. This was what he had missed. This simple, normal, beautiful chaos of family. Mark looked up and saw him, and for a moment the two men just shared a look of pure, unadulterated contentment. The ghost had been welcomed home, but the outside threat hadn't vanished. The Vipers, angered by the alliance, grew bolder. It culminated one night at the last call, the same bar where it had all begun. John was there with a few of his iron dogs, having a quiet drink. Lucy was at home. The Vipers poured in, a dozen of them, led by their sneering president, a man named Cortez. The air turned to ice. Well, the ghost and his puppies," Cortez taunted. "Heard you found yourself a sugar daddy in the Angels. Too scared to fight your own battles?" John remained seated, his posture deceptively relaxed. "This is our bar, Cortez. You're not welcome here." "I go where I want," Cortez said, stepping closer. His eyes swept over John's cut, lingering on the marine rocker. He smirked. "What's the matter, old man? The Corps not want you anymore. Had to join a real army?" One of the iron dogs, a hot-headed young prospect named Leo, surged to his feet. "You shut your mouth!" It was the spark Cortez wanted. He shoved Leo hard. The boy stumbled back into a table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. That was all it took. The bar erupted. It was a brutal close-quarters brawl. Chairs splintered, fists flew, the air filled with grunts of pain and the sound of breaking glass. John moved with the same lethal economy he had in Fallujah. He wasn't fighting for territory or pride. He was protecting his men. He saw Cortez pull a knife. Time seemed to slow down. The glint of the steel, the manic look in the man's eyes. It was a flashback, and the present fused into one terrifying moment. Cortez lunged at one of John's men. John didn't hesitate. He intercepted, grabbing Cortez's wrist and twisting it in a motion that was both fluid and brutally efficient. The bone snapped with an audible crack. The knife clattered to the floor. John drove his fist into Cortez's jaw, dropping him like a sack of stones. The fight was over. The Vipers, seeing their leader defeated, dragged his unconscious body out of the bar. John stood panting in the wreckage, his knuckles bleeding, the adrenaline slowly receding. His men looked at him with a new kind of respect, awe mixed with a tinge of fear. They had seen the ghost, and he was more formidable than any legend. Later at the compound, Mark clapped him on the back. "Heard you handled it. Clean, efficient, just like the old days." John just nodded, the weight of the violence settling on him. He went straight to Lucy's apartment. He needed her light, her scent, her peace. She opened the door, took one look at his face and his bruised knuckles, and didn't ask a single question. She just drew him a hot bath. When he was submerged in the steaming water, she knelt beside the tub and gently washed the blood and grime from his hands. He looked at her, this beautiful, strong woman who had chosen to stand by a broken man, and the words came out unbidden and true. "I love you, Lucy." Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I know," she whispered. "I love you too, John." He pulled her down for a kiss, the water soaking the front of her shirt. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered but this. A month later, the merger was complete. The Iron Dogs were now fully patched prospects for the Hells Angels. At a ceremony at the chapter house, Mark presented John with a new cut. It still bore the Iron Dogs insignia, but now above it was the winged death's head of the Hells Angels. And below it, the rocker still read, Marine. As the brothers cheered, John looked out at the sea of faces. Mark, his brother restored, David and Paul, his new brothers, and the men of the Iron Dogs, whom he had led and would continue to lead. His empire, his family. And standing at the back, away from the chaos, was Lucy. She was wearing a simple black dress, and around her neck on a silver chain was John's dog tag. The one the military had issued, the one he thought was lost forever, that Mark had kept in a box for 15 years. Their eyes met across the room, and in that look they shared everything. The pain of the past, the trials of the present, and the fierce, unshakable hope for their future. The ghost was gone. John Collins was finally truly home. Thank you for watching. What would you do if your past suddenly reappeared after 15 years? Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever had a life-changing reunion.